Good evening. My name is Captain Retired Dan Pionk. I'm the Executive Director of the Navy Supply Corps Foundation, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's webinar featuring a one-team journey on excellence, career excellence, with Mr. Carl Liebert, our distinguished alumnus. First of all, I want to thank our sponsor, CTG, which is a division of Blue Raven Solutions, for sponsoring this webinar. CTG provides supply chain solutions designed to keep fleets and systems operational, ready, and safe. CTG is a leading supplier of parts, material, and obsolescence management solutions to the Department of Defense and its contractors, as well as many of the world's largest airlines, MROs, and aircraft manufacturers. You can visit www.ctgnow.com to learn more. So again, thank you to CTG for sponsoring tonight's webinar. Many of you know about the foundation, but we have a lot of new folks who join these webinars, and some of our folks who attend every one. But we always like to kind of make sure everybody understands what the foundation is about, who we are. And it's real simple. Everybody is a member. If you wore the oak leaf, served any 1 year, 1 day, 30 years as a supply corps officer, you are a member of our foundation. We don't charge membership dues, but we consider anyone who's worn the oak leaf to be a member of the foundation. We are the only nonprofit that's dedicated to providing programs and services to support the Navy Supply Corps community. And really, we promote its heritage and tradition. That's real important. And again, the only nonprofit that really is supporting the Navy Supply Corps community. What can we do for you? Well, we're your connection to the Supply Corps. You can find us on social media, network opportunities, leadership opportunities at both the board and chapter levels, and worldwide engagement at our 38 chapters. We're particularly proud of our scholarship program. That's how we were founded in 1971. Since then, we've given more than $6.6 million in scholarships to over 2,700 dependents. We're really proud of that. It's awarded on a competitive basis, and you can actually sponsor scholarships. We have 4 categories of awards: high school, college, spouse, and community. And that's really, we need your help. We really want more spouses to award more spouses scholarships, as well as enlisted scholarships. And so we appreciate your help with getting the word out. Our scholarship program cycle will open up in December. We give up to $10,000 and up to 4 years of $10,000. So pretty nice scholarships, and really proud of that. And lastly, we're really proud of our memorial scholarships, which go to any minor children of supply officers who die in active duty. We give out $20,000. We promise that to these dependents. And to date, we've given out 44 memorial scholarships, and 44 eligible. We've given 40 who have received or currently receiving. And then I just want to close with the reason tonight's webinar is it's a distinguished alumni webinar. We're really proud of this program. It's a special program. It celebrates the success of supply officers who went beyond their service at time of uniform and went on to do great things. And just a couple of our distinguished alumnus you see here is Senator Gary Peters in the top left-hand corner, Roger Stahlback, Vic Taroni, Bill Merritt Jr. in lower left, and then tonight's Speaker Carl Liebert in middle left, and then finally Regis Philbin. We're proud of all our distinguished alumni. We've basically recognize 1 or 2 every year. And tonight we're very honored to have one of our distinguished alumni with us tonight on this webinar. So again, thank you for your support. Again, we need your donations and support, so please consider giving to the foundation. You can use the QR codes on the screen and go to our website, and we do need your support and help. With that, now it's my pleasure to introduce our Vice Chairman of the Foundation, Eddie Fishburne, who will introduce and let us know about our keynote speaker, Carl Liebert. So Eddie, over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dan. Good evening, everybody. And on behalf of the chairman of the foundation, retired Rear Admiral Mike Lydon, I welcome you to tonight's Distinguished Alumnus webinar, the second in our series. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Eddie Fishburne, the vice chairman of the foundation. And I know my friends out there are saying, people know you already, but I have to say that because not everybody knows me. Tonight, I'll introduce you to the 61st Supply Corps Distinguished Alumnus, Carl Liebert. if you read the bio on the bio info on the announcement, you can easily see that Carl has had a very solid and indeed distinguished career that began happily in the Supply Corps. Just a couple highlights. Carl is a graduate of the Naval Academy, and he's a member of the Naval Academy 1987 Elite Eight basketball team. Hey, Dan, could you go to the next slide? Now, this isn't the Elite Eight team, but to me, this is the more important team. This is the #1 Athens City League team. And you can see Carl there. And there's a lot of familiar faces in there. I know Jeff Pottinger, #5 there. He's listening in tonight. There's my good friend, Captain Andy Waldron, God rest his soul. And Irene, who ran the Pound Hall basketball court up there, and Bobby Dill. I see Bobby Dill, man, sweet touch foul shots. That guy had a great shot. So I wanted to show that because this is just as important, or maybe more important, than the Elite Eight team. But Carl was commissioned in the Supply Corps in '87, served on active duty until '92. He earned his MBA from Vanderbilt. And then Carl, he joined American Securities as a managing director just recently, and he works directly with their portfolio company management team on the development and implementation of the strategic agendas. Carl's had over 3 decades of experience leading in financial services, retail, real estate, and industrial organizations, including being CEO of AutoNation, COO at USAA, CEO of 24 Hour Fitness, EVP, president, head of stores at Home Depot, and a division president at Circuit City. So full disclosure, I've known Carl for a long time. And tonight, I'm sure he will share with you the power of networking that the Supply Corps Foundation provides for all of its members. Long ago, Carl worked for me at Supply Corps School when I was the XO, and he was an instructor and then the educational counselor. Later in our careers, believe it or not, I worked for Carl directly for him at Circuit City when he was a division president and I was a regional vice president, and indirectly at the Home Depot. We go way back, and the path is indeed intricate and very interesting. Bottom line, we always remained connected, and it all began and would never have happened had it not been for the Supply Corps. So with that said, I introduce you to my close friend and the 61st Navy Supply Corps Foundation DA, Mr. Carl Liebert. Take it away, Carl.
Wow. Oh, Eddie, thank you. And I can't tell you once again how special it is, and to see that picture and those great folks, Irene and Andy Waldron. We did a lot of work that year, but we also went 82-0. Winning the Staff O's, were the champions. We won the Athens City League, and as you recall, we went down to Mayport and we won the afloat championships for the Southeast, a little Navy base in Athens. And there's some great friends on that picture that mean so much to me. And certainly Andy Waldron was very instrumental in my career as a lieutenant when I was still learning what it meant to lead. It's an honor to be here, and on behalf of the Admiral and you and Bud Ship and many other members of this elite group, I thought I'd talk to you briefly a little bit about this idea of one team, and I'll ask Dan to pull that slide up for me. And it's a little it's a little simple, I will admit up front, but whenever I have gone to a new command or taking on a new role, I've tried to clearly articulate as a leader what expectations are, and do that, simply said, with one page, so that everybody on the entire leadership team, peers, as well as coworkers, along with the team I've had the privilege to lead, understands both team expectations and then personal expectations. And this page has evolved over 30 years. And if there's folks who've worked with me along the way when Eddie and I were first worked together at Circuit City in corporate America, once Eddie retired from the Supply Corps. This page was probably a half to maybe 2/3 full with the fundamentals of teamwork and the fundamentals of personal leadership. And I thought I'd touch on a few of these. I won't clear the chart or the slide with you, but it's the one page that follows me wherever I go. And that way we can clearly get off in the right foot. So let me start off with what's really most important to me as a team. And Eddie mentioned I had the privilege to play on one of the finest Navy basketball teams, or if not the finest, in 1986 when we went 30-5 and we lost in the Elite Eight. I had the privilege to be a starting small forward on that team that won 30 games and really took advantage that 5 guys guarded David Robinson, and every now and then I was open with those 5 guys guarding him. And so it was a nice time to be at the Naval Academy and be a part of what I think was an incredible team. Another one of our colleagues, Supply Corps officers, was on that team. There were actually 4 of us on that team that went in the Supply Corps. Vernon Butler, who I describe as probably the second best basketball player that ever played at the Naval Academy, and Kyler Whitaker, who was probably the 3rd best basketball player to ever play behind David Robinson, and former captain Derek Turner, who many of you probably remember Derek, who was one of the most special leaders and people that I had the privilege to serve with and work with. And so the fundamentals of teamwork and what it means, and then what we expect of ourselves playing on that team, is extraordinarily important. And I'll highlight this idea of the second bullet down under the team expectations is that our job as leaders, first and foremost, is figure out how we maximize the strengths of our team, minimize those weaknesses of our team, and truly get everyone in the game. And that means you really have to spend a lot of time understanding where people fit and how they fit and putting them in a position to do that. But then emphasize that we're going to succeed or fail together with inclusiveness, passion, and most of all, this idea of kindness. And I think one thing that's transpired in a lot of areas, at least since the pandemic, is we've probably stepped away a little bit from how to be kind to one another. And I think it's important as leaders is that we provide that space to be able to do that. And it's one of the words that I added to this page in the last 3 years, because it's really difficult to have an effective team if we're not treating each other the right way along the way. If you go down a little bit more, and I think this is an important part of how we should be thinking about leadership, and I often talk about an empowered and engaged culture. And for me individually, it starts with courage, with how I define would be the ability to make short-term sacrifices for long-term gains. It takes a lot to have courage in any situation, especially when you come in to a new role. The ability to make a commitment, a decided action from which you will not waver no matter what. And then the definition of character is the ability to carry out a worthy decision after the emotion of making that decision has passed. And there are a lot of moments along the career of being, as you can see, the transformative efforts that Eddie and I worked so hard at Circuit City to transform that incredible company, the work that we did at Home Depot, and then some of the folks who might have been at 24 Hour Fitness when I was there, as well as USAA, AutoNation, and most recently working with Keller Williams as their CEO. But I think that 4th C is really important. And it's how you come into an organization or a part of an organization and approach with a distinct view of curiosity and not jumping to conclusions and being willing to be curious, especially in that first 30, 60, 90 days, when you think you know everything because somebody made you the chief executive officer. The reality is every business, every industry is unique. And the curious leader and learner along the way has the highest opportunity to succeed. And so spending time making sure that you're being curious along the way is important. The last C, this idea of compassion, was something that it really been, I'll call it, thought about and spent an enormous amount of time on of late, probably. And it was the last word I added to this chart. I describe compassion as empathy with action. And I always used to say, hey, we need to have empathy for our frontline team members or our frontline employees, and what's happening in the aisles in front of a customer or USA, what's happening when they call in and they've had an accident or an account takeover or those kind of things. Empathy is really important, but compassion centers around empathy with action. And what I wanted to make sure is, as a leader, is personally that having empathy is great, but when people are asking for your help and need your help, that you have the compassion to actually do something about it. And so it was an important add to this chart. Much of this chart has been with me for the past 30 years, as Eddie has said, and since our friendship began. But I also summarize this chart as the importance of being a lifelong learner. We're never too old, or we're never too wise to realize that we can continue to learn and evolve. And I'm fortunate to have three incredible sons, two of which were born when we were stationed in Athens, Georgia, when I was at the Supply Corps School, and serving under Eddie's leadership and the great Captain Sapira, who I'm still grateful for his mentorship, who I can honestly say wouldn't be here today without it. He was incredibly important to me at a point in my career when I needed someone to be important to me. And he knew that, and he took great care of me, and then later serving for Captain Andy Waldron, as I mentioned. So that's the essence of one team and one mission. I think leaders have to be clear with what team expectations are and personal expectations are. And the idea of, I'm never going to ask you to do something that I won't do myself. So let's put on a piece of paper what I'm going to do and what I'm going to expect you to do. And in turn, how I'm going to expect us to work together and behave. And so that's it, pretty straight and simple. But I know these are always some of the simplest things in life are the hardest and most difficult to execute. And so I'll leave it there, and because I've obviously spoken enough, and I know there were some questions from the group, and I wanted to spend some time really responding and asking those questions. And so if Dan, you want to take the slide down and put me on screen, I want to, before we turn it over to questions, I think it's really imperative. I thought I was pretty early on in my career wanted to be a supply officer. I've always believed that logistics is how you win in life, but it certainly served me well when I've run global supply chain at Home Depot and many other places. But the idea of being in the Supply Corps meant I would be operationalized on a ship. And I was fortunate enough that I didn't know this when Captain Lynn Sapira had my orders got changed and went to work on a supply ship, the USS Caloosahatchee, AO 98, which she was a 43-year-old Ashtabula class jumbleized oiler. We did almost 13 knots with the wind behind us, and 1,200 pound steam. And I got to be a division officer on that ship, which turned out to be an incredibly great working ship, a supply officer on a supply ship. And so therefore I got a chance to play an important role in the wardroom. I got to play an important role for the morale of the ship, obviously. I got to make sure as we lost a basketball or two over the side that I learned how to trade things for extra basketballs in Suda Crete, and recognize that there were ways to get things done that maybe they didn't teach me in the supply corps. But I would say this is that my first role on that ship taught me how to be a teammate. And when we think about the idea of being the supported or the supporting, and when you start to think about joint command in the military, it's a concept that has served me well in the civilian world, because there are times where you're the supporting and there are times when you're the supported. And I had a conversation with an HR leader, a CHRO today, and they were launching benefits, right? We're all thinking about, this is the time of year where everybody re-ups their benefits, which is a pretty important part of any company. And I used the concept today that really the CHRO is the supported right now, and we're the supporting. And in this case, our job is to make sure everybody steps up and supports getting everybody signed up on open enrollment properly, answering those questions, all 2,000 employees of the company I was working with today. And this concept changes. Quarterly, it's a board meeting getting ready where we're supporting the CFO. He's working to be ready and all those things. What I thought the Supply Corps did really well is it taught you how to be part of a team in a real live business environment, serving the United States Navy, obviously, but serving the crew and serving the mission of that ship. And when we were replenishment and we were making sure the carrier battle group was properly fueled, or we were bringing stores on board, there were times where the Supply Corps officer was the supported. But most of the time when you're underway, as we know, as logistics and warrior logisticians, we're supporting the mission of that ship. That teamwork translates extraordinarily well to everything you do. And I've been fortunate to take those early lessons I learned as a bull ensign on the USS Caloosahatchee, and then later as a staff officer representative on the NSCS team, the Navy Supply Corps team, when I was teaching L&M, and then later the 40 Alpha 1, is this idea that our students were getting ready to go to the fleet. And as the educational counselor at the Supply Corps School, our job is to support the fleet and make sure we put the right students on the right ships so that the mission of the Navy can be served. Those lessons have stayed with me until this day. And without those lessons as a Supply Corps officer, I'm confident I would have never understood this idea of how to serve others in order to contribute to the mission of whatever organization we're a part of. And so it's an honor to be with you. Eddie, I'd love to answer some questions if there are any out there for us, and don't hold back. So you know how we know how we like to roll.
All right, so I have a couple that were submitted ahead of time, and I'll read them to you and see how you want to address them. How has sponsorship and mentorship played a part in your success, and how much of your success were opportunities that were turned into successes?
Wow, that's a really deep two-part question. And so Eddie mentioned our working relationship, both when he was a captain in the Supply Corps and I was starting my civilian journey, as well as when Eddie and I worked together at Circuit City, and we had some tough decisions, but we've always maintained this mentor-mentee, mentee-mentor relationship. And I'm fortunate that I already mentioned Captain Lynn Sapera along the way. I do regular calls with a guy by the name of Colonel Art Athens, who was one of my teachers at the Naval Academy and taught Sunday school on the weekends when there, and I've stayed in touch with him along the way. I've been fortunate enough to, I'd say there are 26 leaders that I've had the privilege to work with or have worked for me that are now CEOs and presidents. 26. I equate that to 26 people that I was fortunate enough to work with, and they were successful in spite of me. But one of the things I'm most proud about is that ability to identify really talented people, put them in exciting roles, and then get out of their way and coach and teach, just as people like Lynn Sapera, Andy Waldron, countless folks. Eddie and I worked with a leader by the name of Frank Blake, who remains a friend to this day. Alan McCullough, the former CEO of Circuit City, we chat regularly. Richard Birnbaum, probably one of my best friends in the world, who was the chief operating officer at Circuit City. And the list goes on. Every company was like, folks I've talked to or spent time with that at any point in time, I can pick up the phone and talk to them. And I'm so grateful for the ability to rely on them and then also help them in any way. One of the fun stories, Eddie knows this story, was when we lost the '86 game at the Elite Eight in the Meadowlands to Duke, which was really going to be their first Final Four experience in that great team that they had with Johnny Dawkins, Mark Allery. Danny Ferry was just a freshman on that team. Coach K came into our locker room and said some really wonderful things, even from a West Pointer. I was so blown away I'm crying because, you're so close to the Final Four and your dream as a basketball player growing up in Indiana like I did. And he said, you need to own this moment, because no service academy ever will get this far and get this close and do what you've done. And you just need to appreciate it. And I remember those words really well. And Eddie knows I wrote Coach a note finally when I think it was 4 years later. I was on my ship, we were underway, and I finally had gotten over losing. And I wrote him this note and told him that we had 2 boys, and that I would love to come to Durham someday, and just tell him how much his comments in the locker room, your comments, meant to me in the locker room. And I was underway, and probably by the time we got hit the mailbag, and the mailbag got out, and FPO, and got to Durham. It wasn't a week later, I got a letter and said, soon as your oldest son is old enough, I want you to come to Duke and be a coach in the summer, coach at Duke basketball camp. Bring your son, and he can live with you. And you had to be 9 years old to go to Duke basketball camp, and Jacob went when he was 6. And for 17 straight years, I took a week's vacation and got my leadership training in the summer, living with my sons, going to Duke basketball camp. And since then, Coach K has been an incredible mentor and friend to me. He's been a reference for me on numerous jobs, even though I'm a Navy guy. And he was the first person to call me to welcome me to the Jimmy V Foundation for Cancer Research, a board that I've been on for 17 years to kind of fill Coach Valvano's dream of finding a cure through cancer, for raising money for researchers to find that cure. So I say that, Eddie, from that question, how important it is to have relationships you can invest in, but investing in those relationships is a two-way street, and you should be willing to sacrifice to harden those relationships, because you can't always be a taker of information. You also have to be a giver, and that goes both ways. And I've learned along a time frame is how to help others, because so many people have helped me along the way. And then regularly each week, take time to reach out to 3 or 4 of those people, even if it's just checking in, and stay in touch. because those are the folks that are really important, that matter the most to me, because they've always been there when I needed them. So that's probably more of the first part of the question. The second part, Eddie, was, if you want to read that second part again.
Opportunities. How much of your success were opportunities which you turned into a success?
Well, I mentioned the Caloosahatchee. Like, my orders got changed a week before our wedding. I was going to a cruiser out of San Diego. I was marrying my next door neighbor from Indiana that we'd only been dating for a couple months. I'd known her since she was 12, and she thought we were moving to San Diego. And I called her and said, "Hey, I got good news and bad news. We're not going to San Diego. We're going to Norfolk, Virginia." And she said, "Oh, the East Coast, and never lived there, been there." And I said, "Great." Said, "I got a little more bad news. And my ship is underway in the Mediterranean." Great. She's like, "Oh, okay. So you're going to fly over and meet them. How long do we have?" And I said, "Well, we're going to get married, and we're going to drive the next day, drop our stuff off at the apartment. And then you're going to drive me to Philadelphia. I'm going to get a military hop, and I'm going to be home in 16 to 18 weeks after that." And she wasn't even, she would just turn 21, Eddie. She had, already had her degree and everything. And she goes, "Okay, that's what we're going to do. I'll get everything set up in Virginia Beach, and I'll see you in 16 weeks. And I flew to Sigonella. And the day I got there, our ship was in Haifa, Israel, by the time I'd caught the hop. And our ship could not leave port because the supply officer I took over from was relieved for cause, and it had a fruit fly infestation on the mess decks. Chief Warrant Officer Gerlich did not teach me in food service what to do when you had a fruit fly infestation. And 2 years later, we got the Bluey for the best, afloat supply operation on the East Coast. And we did it with the very same people that were there when I got there. It wasn't me, it was them. And they were terrific. And I think the question in the spirit is run to the fire if you can, because those are the jobs where you can learn the most and make a difference the most quickly. And so early on in my career, I tried to seek out where the toughest, most difficult, unimaginable turnarounds would be needed, and throw your name in the hat and go jump in and do that. And each one of those roles across the spectrum, I've been so fortunate that people trusted me enough when I didn't know what I was doing to take on some incredible things. And the people that I get to work with believed in us enough that they could run through walls. And each one of those stories have turnarounds within them that it took an incredible team to accomplish.
Cool. Okay, let me give another pre-submitted, then I have a live question too that just came in, but let me go with one other here. What is the number one quality you look for in someone joining any of your teams who is transitioning from the military specifically?
Oh, wow. Humility, and this idea to understand, to be willing to admit you don't know what you don't know, and to kind of come in with a curious mindset, but be a learner. The military, we're so fortunate to have an opportunity to serve and to learn from real incredible leaders. And I had some incredible leaders in the military. But I always thought I worked for leaders who were hugely successful, that always understood, and they were incredibly grounded, that they didn't know everything, and that they were going to be learners and continue to learn. And I think that first assignment from the military into what you're starting your career is, it resets the clock for you. And Eddie, in your case, you're a captain, you'd run a supply center, you knew so much about leadership. And I remember when you came to Circuit City, we said we're going to put you in as a district manager, which really was the start to be a leader at Circuit City, and within a very short time, you're already the regional vice president and those things. And Eddie, you never said, "Hey, that job's beneath me. I should be starting at a higher level." Don't you understand? I ran. You never did that, and I think the leaders who can leave the military or supply corps and recognize they're going to a completely new function, and they're willing to just dig in and learn the job and prove their competency. Those skills are so transferable, and I see people moving from company to company trying to rest on the legacy of their last company versus really learning their new company. And that humility along the way, if you can do it, and learn where you are and what you're doing, then I think that serves you well no matter where you go.
Thank you. Thanks. That's a good answer. Let me give you a live question that came in since we've been on here. This question was private equity always the goal? Question one, two-part question. And how long do you give the underperformers to turn things around once you post and show them your one team speech? How long do you give people?
Oh gosh, I should have looked at the attendees. You never know, right? Because you might have some people to validate this. But look, my sons are so funny. The three boys. My oldest was a nuke and a line officer, a ballistic missile submarine. So I think the idea in mind is they think it's really intriguing that I've worked my whole life to be the top of the capital stack now is in private equity, but not as a CEO, but as a managing director working with portfolio companies. I don't think that was the destination, Eddie, and I don't know that I've ever had this is where I want to go or what I want to do. I really struggled with this decision of what I wanted to do next, because do you want to operate and go be a CEO again, which comes with it 24/7, says 365. You don't ever shut down. You can't shut down when you're a CEO. Or am I ready to go be a coach of CEOs where I'm supporting them to be successful, and I'm working diligently to help them achieve the success for their company and their teams. And ultimately, Amy, my wife of now 36 years, reminded me, you always used to say when you retired you wanted to be a coach. This is just a new chapter of you being a coach of CEOs and having the opportunity to maybe help them from making all the silly mistakes you made along the way, and all the scars and everything we did. So it just worked out that way. And in this firm, American Securities recruited me for 3 years, and it took me a while to say yes to that. And I can tell you, I've been doing it for 90 days. I'm enjoying it tremendously. But it's really new, because you kind of know the answers, but it's not about you knowing the answers. It's about getting them to understand the answers or help them get to that answer. And I think that's really what I'm enjoying in the role most about being in P. Second part of that question, Eddie, again?
The second part of the question was, how long do you give people? Once you've given your one team speech and you've given them you've set your expectations. I assume the answer is it depends, but what do you look at? Yeah. When do you look at turning things around?
I just believe in one of my real mentors and folks who I love. If you know the story of Alan Mulally and the turnaround at Ford, Eddie, you'd love Alan. He's one of the kindest, smartest men I've ever had the privilege to get to know, and certainly call him a mentor. He believes that you explain your expectations, you demonstrate those expectations, you give feedback on your reputation on those expectations, and then practice, 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 practice. And so what Alan would always say is, Carl, you got to love them up. You got to love them up, right? And it's their choice whether they want to be on the team or not. But here are the expectations it takes to be on the team. And what happens, Eddie, if you do your best to bring everybody along and get everybody in the game, you realize some people are trying. And so you really coach like crazy to help them try. And then some people, depending on their personality, don't have the capability to be a team player. They're more of an individual player. And if you're having the right conversations, sometimes I've seen those things happen in the first couple days, believe it or not. But I've also seen those take a while to materialize. And so there's a 4 block, if you think about it, and it's very simple. I think the top right of that 4 block, when I put people in a really square 4 block, is right people, right way. That's the leader who's getting results the right way, and they're the right leader. And then if you go down to the lower left-hand quadrant, is they're not a good leader and they're not getting results. Those lower quadrant folks are easier to have a conversation with about should they be on the team, and understanding that they're not getting results and they're not leading the right way. The more difficult conversations are the leader that's getting the right results, but they're not getting them the right way. Because, wow, they're getting results. We can't let this person go. But nobody wants to work with them, and they're harming the team. So they either have to figure out how to lead and move over to the right, or they usually figure out that they're not going to be successful. And the fun ones, though, are the folks with the right way. They just need support to get the results. They're not getting results, but they lead the right way and they want to succeed. Those are the folks you coach up all the time because they have the right values, but they're not getting the right results. And if you're able to coach effectively, you should be able to give them the tools and the experience, if they'll follow them, if they're coachable, to go do that. And so it's a complicated answer, as you said, to that. But usually the folks who are the energy vampires on the team when I show up don't stay on the team very long, because we don't have time for that.
Good answer. Fair. Okay, a couple more, and a couple of these you've addressed somewhat, but I want to go a little deeper. You've had several stops, obviously, in your career. When you look at your bio, was that a strategy that you had at the beginning, or is it happenstance? Did you consciously plan your next moves, or do they just sort of happen as things evolved?
Such a great question. You can probably hear already. I'm gonna draw. If you draw a triangle, and Eddie, I always think of early in your career, you should focus on learning, right? Not money, not promotions, and not title. And so what I always felt is I want to be in position someday to be a general manager or to run a company. And so at GE, when I left the military, it was a difficult decision. I was talking to one of the legends of the Supply Corps, Admiral Straw, about maybe going to DC and working together with him. And he had just taken on a huge role, and it was a difficult decision to leave the Navy. But General Electric was a 3rd generation GE person. So I got to go to purchasing. and I got to do injection molded thermoplastics, and I got the largest procurement desk right out of the military at GE Appliances. And did that for 18 months. We did really, I think, pretty well. Manufacturing is kind of part of that important next step. We had a 3,000 person unionized factory that was losing $50 million a year. And so I raised my hand and said, my next job, I want to run down there and see if I can help fix that factory. And I thought I needed to cross the chasm of, I've been gone from an individual contributor to leading civilian leadership at scale and proving that I could operate in a union environment. From that role, I thought I needed to understand how to be a salesperson, right? Because you're starting, and these were all very lateral kind of moves somewhat, whereas I could have probably stayed in manufacturing and been a VP of manufacturing faster than I could have been a general manager of a business. But what I felt is I wanted to be a generalist that appreciated all the things that created business success and sit in multiple chairs and multiple functions, so that when I am a general manager, understand what they do in procurement or purchasing, understand how to make stuff, I understand how to sell stuff, right? Then I understand what product management, that was my fourth role. I got sucked into the Six Sigma effort at GE, but became a master black belt. So learned that. Then I went from there and ran the extended warranty business. So I learned how to sell an intangible and run the largest extended warranty business at GE. And we were losing almost $200 million when I got there, and we turned it around, which was great. And I learned a lot. And ultimately, Eddie, that's how Circuit City found me and how Richard Birnbaum recruited me, because we turned around. If you remember, GE did the paper on computers and peripherals for extended warranties for Circuit City. And after turning it around, the COO of Circuit City flew in and conned Amy and I to leave. My dad didn't speak to me because obviously he had thought I'd stay at GE forever, and I'm so grateful for it. So I think there's a combination of both. When you focus on learning in your career versus how much money you make or what your title is, then you have an opportunity to build a very wide base. And I think that wide base helps that when you get in the chair of leadership, you understand how important purchasing or procurement is. You understand what it's like to carry a bag and call on a company like Sears and do private label with Kenmore brand. And a lot of people don't even remember the brand Sears or Kenmore, but they were number one. And so in that way, when you're running a staff and you're talking to your sales leader, you appreciate what your sales leader does because you've had their role. You had the product manager role. You had the manufacturing role. And I always thought, and I've always shared, have a wide base early in your career so that you actually learn how companies work. And so that when you have to make difficult decisions, restructuring decisions like we did at 24 Hour Fitness during the great financial crisis, and really, really hard decisions that if we didn't make them would have caused, we wouldn't have made it. You understand where those levers are to do it because you've actually been there, but you also appreciate how hard it is, the things you're asking your people to do. So I always start that triangle is really important in the first 12, 15 years of your career and making you a generalist, but also a specialist because you did the jobs in those chairs.
Interesting, because I always think that the supply corps compared to the other services, we are more generalists than like an Army quartermaster. But so tied into that, there's a question that came in, I think that's very, very good to follow on with that. The question is, do successful leaders in the supply corps have the same qualities as successful leaders in private industry?
Oh yeah, of course, right? People laugh at me. I kind of think they have a leg up because if you're a float supply officer, you serve others, right? You serve the crew, you feed the crew, you pay the crew, you do the laundry of the crew, You are the chief morale officer of that ship because of you are so important to that. And I think Lieutenant Commander Barry Boyd, Eddie knows this because I shared it. You know, my first day aboard, the mess decks, I mean, he was so great. He knew what mess I was coming into. And he said, "Look, you're going to do all that. I heard you were something special at Supply Corps, all this stuff." He's like, "Look, the secret to this," and he says, "is I'm going to grade you really on one thing at the end of the year, as long as you don't, get us in trouble from the stuff you're going to do really well." He said, "I'm going to grade you on how many E2s make E3, how many E3s make E4, how many E4 go, and then can you get an E6 to a chief petty officer? Because that's a magic number for an E6." And he said, "Carl, you get that right, the rest takes care of itself." And I'll never forget it. I've still got my sea bag. I'm in Haifa, Israel. Just left my wife. And I thought that was such amazing wisdom to give a JO. And I think understanding that role as a supply corps officer, not only to serve your shipmates on a ship, but also serve the folks under your command, no matter how big your division or your department is. Those characteristics of learning how to serve others, which is what the supply corps is all about. I don't think any of this happens without that experience, Eddie. I believe it, and I don't shy away from saying that.
Okay, I think we have time for a couple more. I have a very broad question that's less supply corps focused. Where do you see the U.S. economy going in the next 6 months, and what impact do you see that having on relations with China?
Oh, wow, it's such a great question. Well, look, I obviously have lots of insights from just the companies I get to work with every day, but also just I think Eddie's aware I'm on the Naval War College Foundation Board of Trustees, so we get a lot of briefs on China, and then I'm in several CEO roundtables where we're talking about what's going on in the globe. I think we've been incredibly resilient to get to this point without real economic hardship, and it's with 8% interest rates, it feels really difficult for a lot of people to buy a house. That's not lost on me in this environment, given where they were. And also, I remember what Amy and I paid our first interest for our first house we bought, but that doesn't count, right? It's just part of it. The Chinese relationship, especially in the South China Sea, is extraordinarily important, and how we're thinking about our policy there, and probably pray about leadership there and how we navigate that. I think it's really important. We're heading into election year. We spend a lot of time driving divisiveness and being divided in a lot of the ways we think. We're still American citizens and how we think about that. And I worry a lot about what we're going to let Putin do in the Ukraine and how to think about that. My heart is breaking for what happened in Israel. And then all the things that are going on afterward in Israel. And I think it's going to be a really challenging task for our leaders to stand tall and navigate these situations, because I believe any sign of weakness, then I worry about Taiwan. And I've operated in Taiwan a long time. I had 9 fitness clubs in Taiwan. I spent a lot of time there, spent a lot of time in Hong Kong and in Shanghai and Shenzhen with this global supply chain when I ran that at Home Depot. And I think we have to be able to navigate this extremely tricky period and figure out what is going to happen to that tiny little island. off the coast of China. And I don't have an answer for you, Eddie, other than we have to hope that maturity, diplomacy, and leadership, and that our leaders have surrounded themselves with the right leaders. And it's extraordinarily important. And one of my neighbors and coffee mates in Austin is we always laugh a little bit about it and spend a lot of time with the most famous Navy SEAL of all, and that taught us how to make our bed every day when we get up. But we spend a little bit of time talking about maturity and how to think about all these things in context, because it's not just China and what's going on there in the next 6 months. You have to think about the problem in 3D and three-dimensional and everything that's going on. And we have to keep our eyes and our context alive to make sure we're keeping our head on a swivel, is what my coach used to say. So I'll say that in this environment. I'm hopeful that we'll navigate this, but it's going to be a very difficult holiday season, I think. Student loan payments starting to come through, and what that's going to mean to people. I'm grateful for employment to still be hanging in there, but our employment is hanging in there because we don't have enough workers to fill the jobs that we have. So that's a difficult conversation, given what's happened to population and people that have decided during COVID to not go back to work. So we have a lot of opportunities and options to settle that and improve, I'll call it, the frontline education for people who are going to go do service related jobs in our country, as well as skilled trades. We've got a ton of opportunity for folks if they want to go do that. So in a tough macro environment, heading into an election year with the wars or skirmishes going on at the magnitude that they're going on, this is a very difficult hand of cards our leaders are playing right now. And I work for an incredible leader and guy, Teddy Forsman. If you ever read the book Guardians at the Gate and LBOs and private equity, Ted was one of the inventors of private equity. He did Gulfstream, he did Dr. Pepper, he did Yankee Candle, he did 24 Fitness, he did IMG, and he was so great during the great financial crisis for me, as legendary. He dated Princess Di. I mean, this guy was incredible. Adopted 2 of Nelson Mandela's kids, and he said, "Look, as a leader, you got a tough hand of cards to play. You're going to be judged how well you play those cards. You don't get a deck. You don't get a redeal. You don't get to trade them off and get 2 more. All these things. You got these cards. And so you're going to be successful if you can play the deck of cards, the hand of cards in your hand as you see it, not as the people around you see it. And so you're going to have to trust your gut probably more than you've ever had to trust your gut at this point, because none of us have gone through the GFC and the banking crisis that we're facing right now. And certainly none of us that have $1.2 billion of debt on their company like you have, and you've never done this before. So I trust you to play that hand of cards in your hand, but you're going to have to do some really hard things. I think this next 12 to 15 months, the world's going to watch the United States. And if we flinch and how we behave, then we can expect a lot of unintended consequences from that.
Okay, going to leave you with one more, and then we'll let people get out of here. One last one.
Yep. Yes, sir.
If you could distill leadership into one sentence, what would it be?
Wow, one sentence. Never ask anybody to do anything that you wouldn't do yourself. And I think Certainly, my dad always thought that. He taught me that at a very early age. You go into a 24-hour fitness club and the toilet's clogged, and you're the CEO, grab a plunger and go in and show people that you know how to unplug a toilet in a locker room, as long as it's the men's locker room. Work in a store. If you want to fix the supply chain and night delivery, get your butt up at 10 o'clock and go work the all-night shift. Eddie knows this. We took all the engineers and we worked one night a week in the stores because we had a false sense of reality, what it took to unload a truck. And we needed to help everybody understand that the folks in the orange apron get up and care every day about what they do. And we haven't made it easy for them in the supply chain for them to do their jobs, and we got to fix that. And so Eddie knows this is like, just pick up a shovel and let's start working together. And if you live that way as a leader and your ego's not too big to allow you to do that, you'll find that people will follow you just about anywhere.
I appreciate it, Carl. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate your time and your investment in the Supply Corps doing this. Really, really appreciate it. Very grateful. And I know you'll be involved, and I know we'll have more communication, more sessions with the team here. And I'd like to turn it back over to Dan to close us out. Okay. Thank you very much.
It's been an honor. It's been an honor, Eddie. Thank you so much, sir. Yep.
Thanks, Carl, and thanks, Eddie, for facilitating a superb discussion on leadership. Thank you for all attending. Just a final thanks to CTG for sponsoring tonight's webinar. Please do support us. We do need your support. Stay tuned. We have webinars planned each month, more webinars, transition, distinguished alumnus, and really excited about that. You can follow us on social media. That's it. And really thank you for spending the night with us tonight. Enjoy your evening, and we'll be in touch with the next webinar. Thank you very much.